the Spirit Sessions podcast. I'm your guide, Katie Silcox, bringing you your weekly self-love soundbite. Join us, where I'll help you find your true spiritual home, where every single aspect of you is holy ground, holy ground, holy ground, holy ground.
This is Spirit Session Podcast with Katie Silcox, Venga Chicos, empezamos.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. All engine running. Liftoff. We have a liftoff.
Hi everyone, Katie here. This podcast is intended to inspire you, educate you, and most importantly, support you on your journey towards knowing who you really are, that inner self, that inner teacher. I am not a psychologist or a medical doctor and do not offer professional health or medical advice on this podcast. If you are suffering from any kind of psychological or medical issue, please do the right thing and seek help from your qualified health professional. Hey everyone, this is an amazing podcast coming up, and as you'll see in a moment, it's really intimate. It's almost like just a deep conversation between two friends. I think you're going to love it. It's with a woman named Elaine Glass. She is an internationally known spiritual coach, and she's also a dear friend of mine. She is the author of the new book, Get Quiet, 7 Simple Paths to the Truth of Who You Are. You can find out more about Elaine at elaineglass.net. I hope you really enjoy this super sweet, intimate podcast on the vulnerability of soul and just the real challenge and beauty of getting quiet and tapping into who you really are. Welcome, everybody, to Spirit Sessions. I'm your Ayurveda Gal Friday, coming to you with a woman that's going to be your new spirit bestie. Elaine has written an incredible new book that we're going to get into, Elaine Glass, called Get Quiet. And so we've invited her here to talk about the book. But before we dive in, I just want to tell a quick story about how I met Elaine. We were at a conference together, standing in line, I think, for something. Maybe it was like dinner. And I turned around, I was like, hi. And we ended up sharing the fact that we were both writing a book. And Elaine, I said, well, what's your book about? And you said, oh, it's, learning how to sit and get quiet and find that true self and that inner voice. And I said, oh, cool. That's, exactly what my book's about. And we laughed. And then you said, basically, the secret to all of this meditation stuff is just shut the fuck up. And we both had a great laugh. And I knew this woman is a friend. Like the fact that she could just be so candid and real about one of the most important aspects of being a human being, which is just learning how to be with yourself. So Elaine, welcome to Spirit Sessions. Please teach me how to shut the fuck up.
Well, thank you for that wonderful intro. We did have a laugh that night, because we got each other immediately. We're like, yeah, like not only does the world need to do that, but like we need to do that on a consistent basis. Like this is our inner work. We can't teach what we haven't learned ourselves. And so this is this quest, this journey that we're both on. And it's pretty thrilling.
So I know you have a background in more of the scientific, corporate. How did you embark upon, and we're going to kind of go into some of these aspects of your book, but how did you go from the past where maybe life was a little bit more of a material reality to what you talk about in the book as sort of like a spiritual or soul seeking journey? What was the shift for you?
The shift is that my life fell apart. And, just like any change that will come into our lives, unfortunately, we have to have everything fall apart before we can put it back together again. And so 15 years ago, I went through a very, very difficult divorce. I had 2 small children, 8 and 10. And I thought, how could my life have gotten to this? I mean, I thought I had everything. I mean, I was married to a doctor. I lived in a big house. I had all the things. But if someone were really to know me, they'd know that I'd put this, fake mask on when I left the house and then took it off when I got back in the house and cried myself to sleep in my bed alone every night.
Hmm.
That was my reality. And what I had found was that I looked away from my life. And I think there's this fundamental, I call it an addiction, a behavioral personality addiction to looking away at the truth of our lives.
Mm.
And that's what I had done. And I had to get my act together really quick for my kids because they deserved a healthy mom, mind, body, and soul. The other thing that was happening was I had been diagnosed with Hashimoto's thyroid disease. So now it was affecting my health. And I was so young. So I went from having this whole entire beautiful life to everything coming crashing down. And I thought to myself, what is the first step that I need to take to save myself? Because no one was coming to save me. I was hoping someone would, but nobody came. So I had to save myself.
Mm.
And that's what we all have the capability of doing. We all have this power within us, except life and stuff has gotten so heavy. We're carrying so much that's so heavy that we can't access this power. As you know so well with Shakti, with feminine power. It's there. We just need to uncover it.
Mm.
So I went on a quest to uncover step by step this power again that I knew I had intuitively, but it just wasn't showing up in my life. So that's where I started. Side note, I had been a dental hygienist for over 20 years. I had sat with over 40,000 patients one-on-one. I mean, I had held humanity in my hands. And with my hands over the energy of people's bodies,
Wow.
knowing what medications they were on, knowing their stories, their personal stories, knowing their stresses, knowing the depression medicines they were on. And I know a coach of mine was debriefing me after those 20 years, and she said, what did you learn from all those patients? Like, what do you want the world to know? And the words that came out of me was, I just want the world to get quiet. And I knew I needed that as well. So that's where it all began, Katie.
Wow. That's so powerful, the image of you with your hands over all of these thousands of people. We think that we're dental hygienists, but we're actually, Reiki healers or energy medicine women, these roles that we play. What are we really doing? And I have taught thousands of women. And I recently heard Ram Dass talking about how he's just a rented mouthpiece for God. And I thought, that's me. I've been speaking and speaking and speaking and speaking and speaking. And thank God, I think maybe I've touched a few, at least 100 hearts, but who I've really been talking to is me. And what an honor to be able to hear that reminder. In the book, which everyone needs to read, Get Quiet, 7 Simple Paths to the Truth of Who You Are, there's a line in here that just slayed me. You say, getting quiet allows you to get healthy in a sick world. Wow. I mean, not that there's much more to say, but say more about how that insight came to you.
We are so disconnected by the noise of the world, by the fear-based noise, by our own unhealed traumas, that we ignore what we're feeling and we ignore what we need. We're not vulnerable enough to ask for what we need, and we're too scared to feel what we're truly feeling. And what I saw in my patients and what I see in my coaching clients now is this is what causes disease. This is what causes physical disease. This is what causes mental, emotional suffering. And this is what I meant by getting quiet and tuning in and connecting to parts of us that we may not have connected to it before. I'll tell you a personal story that is very top of mind.
Please.
It's about connecting to an emotion that I haven't allowed myself or given myself permission to feel.
Mm.
And that is the emotion of anger and hate. I've always been like, oh, I'm the spiritual, calm Elaine. Everyone, sees me as that. And you might find, the listeners might find that they are that way too to the outside world, but there's something within us. There's another part of us, call it the shadow side, the dark side, whatever, just a side of us that has held a hate for others, a hate for ourselves, an anger inside that we haven't yet given ourselves permission to fully, deeply feel because we're scared. Because if we do feel that at the deepest level, what's going to happen? Do I then have to call myself an angry woman, a hateful woman? I mean, this is literally like what has been happening in my life this week. You're getting like the newest version of Elaine right now.
I love it.
And I think to myself, what's going on, at least in this country right now, feels very angry, feels very hateful.
I agree. Yeah.
And the mirroring of that, I said to myself, well, how do I transcend that? So I don't get caught up in all of that, so that I can stay healthy. I mean, that's the bottom line. Our health is our wealth.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And so I said, well, let me allow myself to feel that same anger that I see outside in the world. Let me feel that same hatred for whatever it is I want to feel hatred for. Maybe it's, a past relationship. Maybe it's something that I did, that harmed somebody in my past. Just something that could stir up that energy and shift that energy within me and have a somatic response. And I have. And it has been a week of such profound healing. And it is all come back to one thing, and that is I am human. We're all human, even though we live a very spiritual life, and we love that. But we're human too. And so I had to come back to the most human thing about me, and that was my breath. So it's been a very beautiful week in that way.
Yeah, we'll put this out in a few weeks, but we're in a very Mars time, like the god of anger and war. And actually August 19th was 2 days ago for you and I, and it's still reverberating, was this very intense Mars day where we had the opportunity to be Mars. And that's what you did. And it could have been blown out like a crazy dragon at other people, which is basically politics, social media, the world. Or it can be self-directed in this deleterious way. But that middle path of, like I said the other day, like exploding vertically instead of horizontally, same. Like I just made this commitment, like I am not going to react. I'm going to taste this and eat it and feel it. And it sucks in the moment, right? But then on the other side of that digestion of my own reactivity and hatred and anger and jealousy and insecurity and self-devaluation, all that, it takes me less and less time now because I don't have as much traumatic material. But now on the other side of it is dignity. It's like I ate it myself. I didn't blow it out at my boyfriend or my staff or, wherever it tends to kind of get trickled out. You talk about in the book getting quiet, and you say either consciously or unconsciously, many people are afraid to get quiet, usually because they equate silence with isolation. And I was reading a study, Elaine, about how people report that they would rather be like, they listed their fears, and the fear of death was second to the fear of being quiet and alone without any distractions in a room alone. Why are we so scared of being alone and quiet?
Yeah, it reminds me of that quote, the measure of a man is a man who can sit in a room alone.
Wow.
And it's the sitting with the human, the soul
Yeah.
loves to be free and loves to wander out into the universe, and the mind can do that, and it takes us to wonderful places. But when we get into the body, into what we've been holding and carrying our whole lives that we haven't addressed, just going back to looking away at the things that we just haven't addressed, that's what gets in our way, because those are the things that come creeping in that we don't want to sit with. Like, we don't want to sit with the fact that we haven't opened up our bills in 2 or 3 months. We don't want to sit with the fact that our marriage is falling apart, and it seems like an uphill battle to even know what to do after you've been married for 20 years. Like, how do you fix this? Like, it just seems insurmountable. And that is why. And so that's why I had to take my first step inward during my crashing moment of just taking one simple step. And that's what I created in this book, is just the steps to be able to start looking and being able to just take one thing at a time. Like I said, even if it's just that one emotion I felt this week, I mean, it's just little things. And that is why it's so hard. But when we really begin to open up that bill that we haven't, looked at, if we start to have that difficult conversation, if we see, all the clutter in our closet that's been building up, that we start to, just move some things out little by little, you will find that it is so empowering. It is so motivating. Like, you will inspire your own bad self around this. I mean, it's so much fun eventually. Of course, it's hard. Of course, it's hard. Nothing that's going to give you your best life ever is going to be easy. We know that.
Yeah.
But it's necessary. Like, this is necessary work.
It reminds me of, in Ayurveda, we have the elemental system, and the fifth element is ether or space, which is defined as the absence of the other elements. It's pure openness and silence of mind, and the pure nature of, like, the actual true nature of the mind is not chatter. It's freedom, and it's silence, and it's pure consciousness. And ether is also the element of love, because it's the space between me and you that makes us different and allows me to fall in love with you and you to fall in love with me, precisely because there's separation and space and, like, silence. And I've struggled so much in my life with being able to just sit with all of the baggage. You and I started this podcast by crying together a little bit, within the first 2 minutes. And it's, for me, the release of tears, of feeling like I'm 44, and this lifetime I have shed so much baggage, so that now when I sit and I'm quiet, sure, it's not always fun, and there's emotions and distractions and memories, and sure, right? But I know who I really am. And in that place of silence, there's limitless light and limitless love, and, like, love and light. We all, like, oh, dolphins and unicorns, woo woo, but it's true. It's like, hey, yo, I'm down with love and light. So maybe express to us through your experience. I know you've spent so much time working with silence and your breath. What is your experience of soul, which is really what we're talking about and what you explicitly talk about in the book?
There's this, and I just want to honor, we did have a little bit of a cry fest. I think we were just so happy to see each other. I think the soul's purpose is is a lot of things. One, to ignite our visionary powers.
Amen.
Because we come in with a soul's calling. And as we, are domesticated and as we go through life's experiences, good and bad, not bad. I don't think there's any bad experience, but not pleasant. Let's just say
not pleasant. I love that.
The weight of the world, is on us, and we are not able to ignite the powers of that soul. And when we start feeling uncomfortable in life, like something is missing, like things just aren't going our way, like there's a lot of no's instead of yeses to opportunities that we really want. Like we just are, the frustration will build. And it's because I believe the soul is something that I believe that we are souls first in this human experience. And what I found in this 15-year journey was that I had totally lost connection with this energy of the soul that I believe comes from the infinite. It comes from the energy of God. It is everything that we are now and that we have been and that we will be. And we need to honor that energy at the highest level. And that means connecting to it at any cost, at any cost. At any cost if the human is uncomfortable, at any cost if the human is out of their total comfort zone, at any cost. This is what causes the suffering, I believe, in our lives, is that we have totally disconnected to the energy of our soul and what it has to say to us and what it has to give us in terms of how we are supposed to express in this lifetime. And so when people come to me and they say something's missing, Elaine, I don't know what's missing, it's always that we're missing ourselves. We're missing the soul that is our true essence.
Wow, so beautiful. I'm always thinking in Sanskrit, and in tantric tradition, the soul is sva, and sta means to be standing in. Svasta is the word in Sanskrit for health. Like health means you're standing in the soul. And so when you're standing in the soul, it's not like, oh, and I'm sure you and I align on this. It's like, I'll never get a disease because I'm standing in the soul, not to be so ignorant about cause and effect. Some of the greatest masters have had horrible diseases and cancers, and often report that those are the very crises, like you said, that bring them to their knees, that awaken them to something infinite. And I love the way that you described, like, at any cost, and you said it 4 times. And there was a energy in the words. You could have said at any cost, but it was like at any cost. Like I heard how much you believe that. And to actually hear someone that really believes that, it just makes me feel like you are a bestie spiritually, spirit bestie, because in the tradition that I've studied, it says you should be looking to find that soul as if you were a drowning man whose head is being held underwater and you're reaching for breath, like with that much passion and fervor and longing for soul. And yet that longing and passion gets diverted to all these other things, that not that there's anything wrong with, sex, love, money, and bonbons, but that we oftentimes are like diverting that passion to things that temporarily placate the discomfort, but ultimately don't satisfy the craving of the soul. How do you weave this soul longing and drive into the fabric of material life and regular everyday Elaine?
I walk these 7 paths that I speak about and get quiet. This is what I did. I took the human focuses and meshed them with energy points in our body. And those 2 things came together and literally created this connection to my soul. we're talking a lot about energy work here.
Exactly. Oh, yeah.
And because the soul is energy, we have to be in that mindset. Each path has a focus. The first path, and when I talk about path, the story is that when I went to go find quiet, I was led to a retreat center and I found this labyrinth, which is an ancient old walking meditative path and formation in the ground that you can walk. And there's one way in and one way out. It's not a maze. It doesn't confuse you. So it's like a metaphor for like a mini pilgrimage inward. And so I found this labyrinth. And so every path that I speak about in Get Quiet is a path on the Seven Circuit Labyrinth. And the first path that I found that I needed desperately on my way to search for my soul and the connection of it was to get quiet, start walking this labyrinth, shift my energy because of the twists and turns, just like the metaphor for life, twists and turns, and then finally reach the center, which is the center of us, the center of you, and connect body from the outside world to the center, which represents this connection to the soul. So each path represents a focus. So the first focus is nurturing your beautiful body. At the time, I remember this coming upon me because I had beat up my body so much. I mean, after 2 kids and 2 C-sections and, thyroid issues, like I just did not feel good in my body. Like, what can I do to feel good in my body and not be running marathons anymore, not be like beating it up, but nurturing this beautiful body. And so I started swimming and dancing in the pool, not doing laps, just dancing in the pool, gracefully, feeling my femininity again that I felt like I had lost. That was the first path. These paths are very simple. But when we've looked away at our lives for so long, this is the roadmap to get back to, well, where do we look? Where do we start? What do we start addressing in a gentle way, in a loving way? And no more beating ourselves up again. So yeah, I started dancing in the pool.
I love that. I love in the book, you guide us through these 7 paths. And I was thinking, haha, this is so cool. She's walking us through the chakras. You're walking us through the energy centers. The whole book is about Shakti. It's about that feminine, what we call feminine power. We all have it, men and women. And it is this connection to life force. And what's so incredible about I call myself like a prana, an energy junkie. It's like, this is my work. And what's so cool about connecting to it is that for me, when I connect to it, Elaine, I feel that which doesn't die. Yeah, you'll have more energy. And yeah, prana, energy is the great digester of the karma, aka trauma. Yeah, she does all these things and keeps you alive, and there's all these levels, but like what we're really doing is connecting to the part of us that doesn't die. In the book, you talk about cleaning out your freaking garage and closets and clutter, and it's like, what does that have to do with spirituality? And it was just like, I loved the way you said, this is a reflection of your prana, your energy. So in the book, you talk about cleaning out, moving furniture. And Elaine, literally, this is so embarrassing, but I talk about everything on the podcast. Like, I am living in a rental house full of someone else's shit. And it's like it's not bad shit, but it's theirs. And like, I didn't buy this sofa from Crate and Barrel. Like, I would not have chosen that from, whatever. And it's all this other person's stuff. And like, there have been multiple deaths, and so like, not only someone's stuff, but dead people's stuff. And I'm living in this house and it's been a blessing in some way. So I'm in a rental house. I have another house that I'm trying to sell that hasn't moved. And I already bought another house. So I'm sitting with 3 houses was thinking, God help me. And I'm reading your book and I'm like, oh my God, this explains everything. And luckily, I know like things are shifting and like I'm going to be moving into the new place end of September. But it really helped remind me that A, you may not always be in the perfect situation, but B, like how much our material world does affect how we feel energetically. Walk the listeners through kind of how you came to the realization that you needed to start cleaning out your closets.
When I shifted the energy by nurturing my body first, that's
Okay.
the first path. Intuitively, I just started clearing my closet and I opened up a box that I hadn't opened up in so long. So to answer your question, it was just that my body intuitively knew to start to shift the next thing. What was going to be the next thing? And I, one morning, just found myself opening up a box that I hadn't opened up for probably 2 decades in my closet, back in the back of my closet. This is the thing about this work, about spirituality. You just don't know where your energy wants you to go until you get there. I didn't know that I'd be swimming in a pool. I didn't know that the next thing would be opening a box. It's like something carries you. And it is your soul is carrying you to the next thing that you need, that you specifically need. And so I opened up a box. I started seeing all these childhood pictures and photos of like, oh my, that's who I was when I was little. My grandparents' photos, how much I miss them, how much they gave me in terms of their values and work ethic and so much. And that was so enriching. And that was so life-giving and fulfilling. Just that one opening of one simple box. I was like, wow, what if I looked at the next box? And then what if those clothes hanging there weren't clothes that were no longer me anymore? And it just became this like year-long cleaning and clearing and shifting the energy in my environment. That became the second path. I mean, this whole journey has been so surreal, Katie, because it's just that I have followed the energy of my soul and where it was guiding me and what I was hearing, and mainly trusting what I heard.
Well, I think that's what's going to be on the listeners' minds. Okay, Elaine, I want to do this too. How do I start to hear the voice of my soul so that I can follow what it says for me on the journey?
Everyone hears things differently, feels things differently. So don't come into this with any expectation, because I heard things, but I also felt things. I also sensed things in a deep way. Nothing said, Elaine, go to your closet and look at that box. It was just that my energy went to that box and I just met it there. I was present.
There was a moment when you're like, I'm going to start cleaning out my closets. It's like an impulse. And then you followed it.
Thank you. Couldn't find the words, but leave it to you to get them perfect. It was an impulse. Exactly. And I followed it. But I do have to say, the first time I walked the labyrinth, it was so quiet in my chaotic life up until that moment that I found the labyrinth. I started walking the labyrinth and I clearly heard. It wasn't a feeling, but I clearly heard. It's like someone was sitting on my shoulder saying, surrender. That I clearly heard because I'd given myself, like you said, the space. So you will hear things so clearly that you will know is not your overthinking, fearful mind, because it is such a loving, clear voice.
Amen.
And the day that I heard surrender, Katie, I went back to my car. I turned on my car radio, and the announcer was talking about all of the things surrender. So not only will you hear things, have impulses, but you will have synchronicities and your whole spirit team and God supporting you, because that energy that you have disconnected from has just been longing and waiting to guide you. And it's the most beautiful and profound aspect of this human experience, in my opinion.
Thank you. I mean, you and I are so aligned. I feel like, so I have to tell the listeners. So I used to be in the yoga world. I was on the cover of Yoga Journal. I used to teach at all the Yoga Journal conferences all over the world. I was like the yoga girl. And I shifted and I started Ayurveda school, and then I became the Ayurveda girl. And then there came a moment like you of crisis where, and people listening and even my students don't really know about this, but I intentionally began to like surrender the layers of those identities. And of course, I still teach yoga every Friday morning, and I still have Ayurveda school, but the role that you called it, that persona, that mask, I've been really working at dissolving that and letting it go. And there's been so much freedom, because one of the things I realized that I actually am, that my soul is I'm a comic. Like, I'm a goofball. I'm a mystical comedian. I'm not a yoga teacher. I'm a fool, and the fool is the mystic, right? And like, that's also a persona, but it's closer to my soul, Elaine. And one of the powerful steps I took during the pandemic was I signed up to go to a biohackers conference. And I did not know a soul. I'd never gone to this. I was used to being a teacher at conferences, not an attendee, And so I show up to this Dave Asprey's biohackers conference. Like, first of all, wow, lots of hot dudes, right? I was used to the yoga girl conferences, no to guys, right? I'm like, whoa, I'm swimming in a sea of men and I'm all alone. And I was very nervous. And I set an intention the night before, because I was so nervous to just be alone at this conference. Like, I prayed with my mentor, let me call in like my star brothers and sisters, were the exact cheesy words I use. Woo, 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 right? Calling in, and may I meet them, and may I just not meet anyone I'm not meant to be with. And if I don't meet anyone, that's fine, right? So I go in and I walk into this huge conference center, and there's tables, and I was going to go sit down, and I didn't know anyone. And I saw this man, and he had kind of a bald head and like a strong build. And my soul was like, that's a star brother. And I was like, okay. And so I say this story because I heard that. And then the ego and the fearful Katie, the little girl, was like, how are you just going to go sit beside this big guy at a conference? He's going to, all the doubts came in. But luckily I pushed through and I just sat down and I said, guys, to Elaine's husband, Michael, hi, you look like, here are my exact words, you look like someone I should know. And he looked up at me and he was like, really? And he was very, very nice, but very reserved. Michael's not like, he was like reserved and kind and calm. And we started talking and I was like, what do you do? And he was like, what do you do? So Michael ends up being sort of the creator of this incredible summit where all of these wellness people gather. And he ended up inviting me into this incredible group of like-minded entrepreneurs and wellness people. And I've been hanging out with you guys for 3-4 years now. And Michael ended up being my business coach for 6 months. I mean, I met you, his wife. So I share that because I don't know if you knew the full version of the but
I did not, but I love this story. I love it.
This is how I'm feeling. Like, now you're on the podcast. And like, I think what I would just want to express to listeners is you will hear the voice of your soul. And then will you have the bravery to do what it says? Because it's oftentimes going to be the opposite of what you're used to and what your ego actually wants and what your friends and family think and want. And so help us. How do you overcome that initial fear, terror, trepidation about actually stepping into that bravery? Because it asks that of you.
Well, that's the $1 million question. For me, it was that my life had gotten so turned upside down that I was desperate to do anything. So I was sort of like, I'll try anything that's different. That was my experience. Some people, their lives are pretty steady. They're still a bit shocked by what they hear, and they have to ponder it a while before they take action. And that's perfectly fine too, because we do have to try things on. It's not like we just go 100% in it. I mean, I had gotten to the center of the labyrinth hundreds of times and probably took 70% action on what I heard, which I think is pretty high.
Good.
Yeah. So it's not like you have to take every action that they hear, but like I had heard in my dating years, this is the person for you. But I just knew it wasn't. And so, there were things that where my mind wanted to trick me.
Yeah.
And the ego came in because I so desperately wanted to find love.
Yeah.
And then there were moments where I got to the center of the labyrinth, which is, by the way, right across the street from my house. So it's not like it's very easy to go and really get quiet for me and find that spiritual tool to find and connect to my soul's voice. And there was one time where I saw rose petals in the center, and I had just met Michael, and I clearly heard he's the one. And there were rose petals in the center of the labyrinth that day that someone had just sprinkled and left. So you're going to see signs that are much more confirming, because it's not just your soul, but you've got a whole spirit team helping you.
Okay, so let's talk about that.
Yeah.
My mentor, my beloved Crystal, she talks about calling in your guidance and your spiritual support. How can people begin to do that practice? It's so subtle.
Things are so, we're talking about intangible things. So if I could paint the picture of how this happens, I think we connect to the senses, to the impulses, to the signs, to the messages we hear. Then we see like, okay, I heard surrender. Then I hear it on the radio. Then I begin to surrender.
Do it.
Right. And then I begin to do it. And so all of these things begin to shift energy. And I believe that is the language that the guides, your spirit team, respond to. Like, this girl means business.
Oh.
She's in it. She started.
I just got chills, girl.
Like I said, walking these spiritual paths ignites these visionary powers. Mm-hmm. And you will either meet somebody who will say, oh, I sense you have a big spirit team around you. Like, you'll just begin to get in those conversations where you'll begin to believe like, oh, maybe people that have passed, who I love so dearly and miss so dearly, maybe they're watching over me. And so you kind of begin with, oh, well, that energy of someone still maybe very present, the soul of that person, really what I believe it is, helping you and guiding you and supporting you. So even if you just think, well, you just have one person, one soul, one energy helping you.
Yeah, it's so much about like what highlighted for me when you were speaking is they need to know that you mean business. Like, that first step has to be you. Like, I'm humbly asking for support. I'm humbly, like, there's a humility around allowing the individuality, the egoic self to surrender and be held by these greater influences. Like, we're so conditioned, I am, to think that I'm doing it and I'm alone and I have to do everything by myself. And like, it's so ingrained in me that to actually let the spirit guides, the support, the divinities, the world, right, in, for me, at least, there's this quality of being humbled by how ignorant, not like putting myself down. I mean this literally, just the ignorance of being in the limited form of the body, like, and the limited egoic self, like how limiting that is. And now humbly open myself to the limitless that I can't even begin to fathom. And that's when, for me, the magic can start to flow again. But I'm getting such a teaching with you right now, Elaine. It's like there's an area of my life that I'm really struggling with. And I realize I haven't asked for any help. Like maybe from people or things, but not like spiritually. Like, no. Like I have to warrior through this by myself.
And Katie, this to me was my biggest lesson and continues to be. Because as a single mom, I was mom and dad, women take on so many roles, wear so many hats, think we have to do everything alone. But we need to be vulnerable, not only to ask human beings for help, but we need to be vulnerable and ask spirit for help. And when we open up those conversations with spirit, that to me is spirituality.
That's right. That's it. It's a relationship.
It's very simple. That's what it means to be spiritual.
Wow, I love that. So walk us through like, and it's fine if it's like, look, that there's no routine, but what's the Elaine Glass daily spirit lady routine? Is there like a non-negotiable practice that you do? Does it change from day to day? Like, what does your practice look like?
Well, I wish I could tell you it was something very regimented, but it's not.
I love it. I kind of thought it was like free flowing, like you in the pool.
It is so free flowing because there were so many to-do lists, so many things that were so regimented for so many years of my life. And now with my kids having, now they're in their 20s and grown, and just the freedom that I have. It's just, that's the time that I have in my life. Others might feel like things are more regimented. And so you have to fit in certain things in more of an intentional way. And I get that. And you should. So meditation is always, but see, what used to be a meditation practice is now really my life is a meditation. I am so present. I mean, that is my intention, to be so present throughout my day that I feel like my life, like I just meditated all day. You just become this, what I feel, this quiet power of being awake and aware to everything and allowing anything to come in, good or not good, and being with it.
That's it.
That's really it.
Yeah. That's one of the best descriptors of Tantra, the word. I was reading Chogyam Trungpa Rinpoche this morning. It was like a Tibetan tantric. And he said the Dharma can be defined, like Dharma, for those of you, like, the way that Elaine and I are speaking about, the soul way, is defined as fundamental non-aggression with what is. I was like, even if I'm fundamentally not being aggressive towards the fact that I'm feeling aggression, but like this fundamental way of yes, even in the no, and a fundamental sense of openness. And I think I went from doing like a hour to 2 hour crazy hardcore regimented tantric practices to like very open, free form, like you. And in a way, I still like to sit and meditate and breathe, right, to keep my ability to be present. But I think there's a way that as we grow in the path, that meditating for 20 or 30 minutes isn't enough. Like it's like woven into everything.
It is. It's woven into doing your laundry, cleaning your house, picking your kids up in the carpool lane. Like it's woven into everything. And we miss out on life and think, well, my life doesn't have any meaning. It's because we're not present to this simple, everyday, mundane. The mundane is your life. Welcome.
Welcome. This is all there is.
And it's beautiful.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's so beautiful because in the mundane, you can see what I believe is the beauty of life.
So for those out there listening, I'm playing listener's advocate. In the book, you talk about going through your divorce, going through this career change, going through having Hashimoto's, and now you mentioned dating, and then you met your partner, your man, Michael, that I met as well. For those listeners out there longing for love, who are in the Dante's seventh hell realm that is online dating, or trying to date in their 40s or 50s or their 20s, like, or their 60s, like, what would you say for the woman who is in the place that you were in? Not that, oh, I met Michael and now my reality's perfect. I know that's not the truth, but you are in this like beautiful partnership now. Like, what advice would you give to people out there who are in that liminal in between?
Open your heart back up again.
Yeah.
Would be the first step. Don't approach another human being with a closed heart, thinking that human being is going to be the one to open it. Like, you go first. We go first. I remember being in a little town in central Mexico called San Miguel de Allende. And my life at that point, I had not been dating. I was just wanting to be vulnerable enough to open my heart up again. First to myself and then to somebody else. And I remember being in this beautiful church called the Parroquia de Archangel Michael. And it's one of the greatest churches, the most beautiful churches in the whole entire world. And I was feeling so beautiful myself in this flowing red dress that I was wearing that day. And I sat in the pew praying because I had forgotten how to talk to God early on. And that's why I think my life also kind of came crashing down, was I had stopped having those conversations with Spirit. So I found myself in this church praying. And the next thing I know, this wedding started happening. And this wedding and these people started coming into this church. And I was like, oh, I think I'm going to stay for this. It's kind of crashing a church. And the groom walked down, and then the bride met him. And in that moment, Katie, my heart bursted open. You just never know where you're going to find yourself. Again, these impulses that I had, stay in this church, stay for this wedding, feel the love that you see these two people have for each other, and know that you can receive that again in a healthier way. And it's just these moments of being present to, I want to stay here. I want to feel this. I know I can have this again. And I know that I deserve it. And 3 months later, Michael came into my life because I shifted the energy. Shift the energy to an open heart.
Yeah. One of the biggest, and I'm not saying it's not still, like one of the biggest journeys for my soul in this lifetime has been my trials and tribulations with finding a partner. And like, I am like a lover girl. Like, I love men. I'm a great girlfriend. I'm wifey vibes. Like, I very much identify as like Lakshmi and Aphrodite and like all the goddessy sexy energy, and I have a similar star configuration as like Dolly Parton and Marilyn Monroe, where you've got this like bodacious blonde sex vixen in your face, but like underneath is this like total soft wounded deer, baby deer. It's like, I never had a dad, like, or please love me, mother me, parent me, and so like the facade of that that I mentioned in the beginning, like that sort of Ayurveda girl or yoga girl, like that started to crumble. And I realized, like, despite this outer appearance that I'm maybe really good at putting on consciously or unconsciously, and not to say it's not real, it's not an act, but that's not my true self. And that underneath that was just so much hardness and resistance and fear and anger and like a tough girl. And it was so shocking to me how much anger there was towards men and relationship. And what's so funny is if you would ask any of my ex-boyfriends, they'd be like, it was obvious to me. Like, you weren't fooling me, girl. You know, like it was so not obvious to me. And as I let myself really see how much I blocked it, despite really wanting it, I was able to actually see there was just a lot of, and still something I work with is like really learning how to not devalue myself. And I was longing for a partner to value me when I was devaluing myself. And so energetically, the energy was one of devaluation. And then Elaine, I would attract in like the DSM manual of psychiatric personality disordered men who devalued me. It was like, you're literally learning this. And by the way, like I am not victim blaming. Like sometimes you meet a narcissist and all this, but like, I don't think that that's typically the case. I think all of us are working with these energies of narcissism and self-devaluation, and we're manifesting certain aspects of it through these relationships to mirror it to us. And as I began to heal that self-devaluation complex, I began to date nice men. Like, and it was amazing. It was just like the energy changed. And the men that I even was attracted to changed. And I think that's huge. Like what I see with so many women is you say that you want a nice man, but then when one shows up, you're not into him. You're not attracted to him, but you are attracted to this one that's devaluing you or is a narcissist. Or so that conversation around like shift the energy and everything else follows. It's super real. But what I want to express to listeners is it can take time. Like I'm 44 and I still feel like I'm honing it.
I think we are honing it. First of all, thank you for all of that. It's very vulnerable of you to share all of this, but it really is real talk that we need to hear. And yeah, we go first. We have to go first. We have to help ourselves first. It's so dishonoring to be, say, a beautiful woman, you know, and use that beauty to attract a nice guy and get that nice guy caught up in your web of, you know, trauma.
Girl.
How many times does that repeat in women's lives, you know? It's not honoring another soul's life here. And when you become sensitive to that, you go, okay, I need to look at my stuff here first.
Okay, so like this is not something specifically in the book, but this is so important. And you brought it up, Elaine. Like I've not heard a lot of women talk about it, and we talk about it in the Shakti school specifically. And you can always tell there's kind of this like discomfort in me and in everyone, but I want to honor it because it's just an energy. And if we can see it in ourselves, we won't be used by it and using it to manipulate others. But in the current culture, it's all well and good for women to talk about how, you know, I'm finding my inner tigress and hear me roar. And like, you know, women are the consummate victim of society. And like, now we're the feminine is the future and women power, women power, women power. We're all goddesses, right? And I'm like, no. Like, there is this shadow side of the feminine that you named that I'm using my beauty to manipulate. There's a seductress energy that I think doesn't get a lot of press. And my teacher, because I have an amazing teacher that will like literally call me out on these things and it's awful and amazing. And she's like, oh yeah, like that story you just told about how you wanted him to text you back in this very specific way. And you were going to kind of do this and that to get that text. That's the energy of the sorceress. And then she's like, well, the sorceress is she who uses her Shakti to get others to do what she wants. And when you name it like that, it's like, wow, it's everywhere. Like, even in my current relationship, like, am I writing him this or saying this to get a certain result? Like, if we could all just not make ourselves bad and wrong about it, but like, when I've been able to see it, Elaine, I can catch it and I can make another choice. And what's so wild about this is you give that person the freedom to be who they are, and usually they come towards you.
This is a point that this is probably one of the main reasons why women have a difficult time finding a healthy relationship, is that they don't realize the manipulation
Absolutely.
that has started the union, and it never ends well.
Wow.
It never ends well. So it's finding the beauty within,
Yeah.
finding that open heart, finding the light within, getting quiet, connecting to our soul, what's really real, and discovering that and embodying that and sharing that.
Wow. Put that on a tattoo on my arm. I love that. Elaine, you have been so generous with your heart with me today, and it allowed me to be just super open with mine, and I just adore you, and I am so excited. Everyone get out there and get the new book by Elaine Glass, Get Quiet. If there were any last closing words for our listeners, what would they be?
You are not alone. You have a whole spirit team just waiting to support you and guide you. And trust that.
Thank you. This feels like a podcast recording, but also just a divine appointment, a synchronistic union for me. So thank you so much, Elaine, for being on Spirit Sessions. And I can't wait to see you in real life, hopefully sooner than later.
Thank you so much, Katie. This has been so wonderful with you. Thank you.
A big special thanks to Kevin Carlisle of Goodbye Gemini, who wrote this beautiful podcast music, and to DJ Juan Pablo Jimenez in southern Spain for mixing it and making it magic.